Good afternoon. While we're having lunch today, we are going to have a speaker. But before I introduce her, I would like to take a quick moment to recognize the table that I'm sitting with today. The people who are sitting at the table with me today are members of and work with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde's Tribal Member Review Board. And they review cases just like the other CRB review cases, but all their cases are kids who are tribal members with the Confederated Tribes. So I would like us to give them a special welcome to the CRB conference. Our speaker today was a referee on the Multnomah County bench for a number of years, and then she went on to the Grand Ronde tribe and was a tribal judge for them. Judge English was actually, or is credited with being the inspiration and the driving force behind starting the Tribal Member Review Board for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. And she did that from her years of experience on the Multnomah bench and understanding and realizing how critically important the work of the CRB is to the court system. So with that, Judge English.
Good morning. I am very pleased to be addressing you once again. You are my favorite audience, and I really don't care if there are lawyers or judges who hear that. Because I've been at the conference the whole time, and before I came to the conference, I had time to call a CRB member in almost every county in Oregon, and also some of the administrators and the judges and some of the lawyers. And I have to tell you that CRB, you are the most enthusiastic, inspirational volunteers I've ever had contact with. It doesn't matter what the issues are, and there are always issues, but you seem to never lose your dedication or your enthusiasm or your appetite for inspiration. So I always really love coming here and addressing you. So I'd like to thank Clayton Kubota for asking me on your behalf, and I'd like to begin by asking, who is CRB? What does it stand for? Is it like curmudgeons revenging the bureaucracy? That's a little radical, but that's how I really view you. In one speech I gave to you, I compared you to Harry Potter wizards with all your magic and your charm and all of the fantabulous results that you did get, you were getting. And in another speech, I decided that you were really your own daytime soap operas. You know, like I'll Cry Tomorrow and As the World Turns, and as one of you suggested at the time, All My Children. So I thought, well, I could do reality shows now in this day and age, and we could be 16 and Pregnant, or Biggest Loser. We could have our families compete for that. Or the CRBers could compete for Survivor. But I decided instead to call you, because I just finished writing a memoir about my experiences, both an abused child from a very abusive alcoholic family, and my experiences in juvenile court. And I realized that what I was talking about in my memoir was interrupting child abuse, interrupting judicial indifference, interrupting agency malfeasance, and interrupting children from bouncing and bouncing and bouncing and bouncing from placement to placement to placement. So I decided to call you the interrupters. Similar to, remember the borrowers, those of you who have gray hair? The borrowers were these little people who lived in big houses, and they had this profound effect upon the big people who lived in those houses. And I look at you as ordinary people, ordinary citizens, who have this amazing, profound effect on this huge system. And my friend said, interrupters, that sounds a little negative. But I want to tell you, there's no way to have a negative term for the citizen review boards. There's just no way. And so I want to read to you what the definition of interrupt is. It means to cause or break in the continuity or uniformity of a process. To cause a break in that uniformity or continuity of a process. Or it means to break off or cause to cease, as in the middle of something. Or it means to stop a person or a thing in the midst of doing or saying something, especially by an interjection, such as a question. So I view you, let's take an example. Let's say after this meal that I, Judge English, and you, one of you, and say a DHS worker, we go into a malt shop and we order a shake. Wait a minute, I'm not in Utah anymore, where I live. So instead, we go into a bar and order a beer. But since it's been a 10-day review, you order a double scotch and 2 sidecars. And we sit there and we're talking, and I say, oh, wasn't that wonderful? I've sat in on the reviews, all 10 of the reviews, just to watch you work. And I say, wasn't that wonderful how Mrs. Gonzalez has really followed her alcohol and drug treatment plan since December? And the caseworker says, oh, wait a minute, no, Judge, it was January. And I say, oh, please, I should know. I'll look at my records. It's December. And I pull out my papers, and the caseworker says, no, it's January. It's January. I'm sure it's January. And you say, oh, cut the crap. The date doesn't matter. What I want you to know, Judge, is I was watching that mother. And you know what? She was going like this. She was rolling her eyes were glazed, she was looking everywhere, she was blinking, she was tapping her feet, and she was still using. And you know what, Your Honor? She never even looked at her caseworker, and her caseworker never even looked at her. Well, needless to say, you have been left alone in the bar now to drink your second double scotch. Because, of course, we are totally offended. But the case is stopped. The case is reset. The mother is re-referred to alcohol and drug treatment, and the child is not returned home. That is a good interruption. That is the kind of interruption that you make. Now, CRB has a long, long history of being excellent interrupters. You have taken on what I consider to be, and always have considered to be, and I know many of the judges in this state consider it to be, a judicial role. I want you to understand that. You may be ordinary citizens, but you are judges in a very profound way, because the recommendations that you make often become orders, especially as you gain respect, especially as you gain prominence, and especially as your reports become better and better. So what you are doing when you're doing your findings and recommendations is you are not just serving as a judge. I mean, all I had was what was before me, proscribed by the rules of evidence. What you're doing is being, like one of you said, a grand jury. You hear everything. You hear much more than we do. You see things we don't see. There are so many of you. There are 4 or 5 of you or 3 on a board, and you can look and you see the facial expressions, and you see the feet moving, and you see the heads wagging. You see how the child responds to the worker. You see all of this stuff that when we're judges, we don't necessarily see because everybody is on their courtroom behavior. So you can make findings to us, particularly in that section called additional findings, which is so important. Findings that say things like, Your Honor, we noticed there does not seem to be a good relationship between the social worker and the mother. Your Honor, we noticed that the father seemed to be sleeping through the hearing. I mean, these, I'm sorry. It shouldn't just be the father. Sometimes the mothers sleep. Or, Your Honor, we noticed that the child was looking down the whole time his attorney was talking. We're concerned that that child is not saying what needs to be said. I see that in the additional findings. Bing. I know that I better set a hearing, I better set it quickly, I better find out what is really going on in this family, and then you make recommendations. It's perhaps appropriate for the child to be interviewed in chambers. It's perhaps appropriate to change the caseworker. It's perhaps appropriate to have another urinalysis, a surprise urinalysis done on the mother. So you can make these findings to me and these recommendations to me that I as a judge may not have grasped. You may say, I just sat in on a workshop, so interesting to me. You may make a finding. The caseworker doesn't know why the adoption has taken 5 years. We recommend, Your Honor, that you ask for every detail of the DHS adoption plan to be solidified in writing, when it was done, and by whom, and what is left to be done. And I will see that as a judge, and if you can't get the information out of them, I can get the information out of them as a judge, possibly, about where is this on the process? Why is it taking so many years? I have seen you. I sat for 14 years on the juvenile court bench in Multnomah County, and then I have sat in the tribal court, on the tribal court bench for 7 years. And I have seen you interrupt boilerplate plans. I have seen you say, these services being required now are not related to the jurisdictional basis of this case. I have even seen you, when I began to make no reasonable efforts findings, I've seen you say, Your Honor, we believe that the harm done to this child by removal and placement in 3 different places is more damaging than a return home would be. And I need to tell you, I told you before, which I haven't really ever expressed publicly, I was raised in a family of 5 children by a very abusive alcoholic mother and a sexually abusive father. And I tell you now, as do all my siblings, thank God we were never removed. Our mother, for all her faults, took us to drive-ins, read us stories. We loved her. We loved her. And we wanted to stay home not because we wanted to be beaten or we wanted her to be alcoholic, but we wanted to stay home because we loved each other so much. We had this amazing sibling bond between us. And yes, us oldest children were parentified. We took care of the younger children, but it made us strong in many ways. And it disabled us in other ways. But as our speaker was saying earlier today, there are many wealthy families. We were very poor. There were many wealthy families where there was all this dysfunction in the families. But kids learned. They learned how to adapt. They learned how to be strong. They learned how to be ambitious, nevertheless. And you have to weigh that. And the CRB often, for me, would say in their findings, we're not sure that return home isn't better than keeping these children in foster care when there are no services available. The waiting lists are months long. The parents can't afford to access these services which aren't provided free for them. And the kids and the parents have a terrifically strong bond. negative in many ways, but more positive than bouncing from foster placement to foster placement. So it's the idea of be sure you always keep in mind the weight of the harm of removal, because that is a factor that sometimes the CRB would point out to me, and I would think, how could I have forgotten that? How could I have forgotten that from my own childhood? And you will point it out to me. But what if all is well? What if you get a case and the permanent plan is exactly what you think should happen? It's moving along really fast. The worker is very competent. The lawyers actually show up and they actually contribute. And you have heard from all the parties. So you don't have any questions. You don't have any concerns. Well, I want to remind you that all is well because 27 years ago, against all kinds of opposition, we introduced legislation to form you, to make it possible for you to be here and to be our right hand. And when we did this, it was like putting a baby. Well, I just saw a video on YouTube. Believe it or not, I know how to use YouTube, of a baby dressed in a zebra kind of outfit at the Oregon Zoo, and the lioness was clawing at this baby, and I thought, CPS! But really, that's what it was like when we introduced legislation to form the Citizen Review Board. The CPS at that point, or SOSCF or DHS or I don't remember what the acronym was back then, opposed us because they didn't really want minions doing this work. They didn't think you were professional enough to do this work. Judges were very opposed for the most part because they thought it was very improper for real people to be looking at these cases and deciding things for these children. Lawyers, to the extent that there were any lawyers back then, were appalled because it meant, oh, so much more time wasted appearing at the CRB. And so from the beginning, 27 years ago, for those of you who are newbies, the CRB process was necessarily antagonistic and adversarial. There was a lot of confrontation, a lot of demand, and a lot of recommendations to the judge that perhaps reasonable efforts weren't being made. And I watched you. I've watched you over these decades. I've watched you interrupt agency malaise, workers who aren't doing their job. We are a state that has the power to remove children from their families, and we first need to use that power to save those families. And you would always tell me, Your Honor, this social worker is not doing a good job. And yesterday, Dan Garris taught us how to use verbal judo, which means how to say what we need to say without reducing the dignity of the parties. And I don't care how bad they are. They don't need to be humiliated, and they don't need to be demeaned. But you can say in your findings, this social worker is so overwhelmed, she is not doing her job. You have to tell me that, so that we can make sure that something else happens. And we recommend that you set this hearing in a month, Your Honor, and compel compliance from the social worker. This becomes their problem, and it is their problem, and it's a difficult problem how overwhelmed they are. But a social worker's overwhelmingness, the fact that she is overwhelmed or he is overwhelmed, cannot stand in the way of our children's lives. We must do something different. And here's where CRB really came off the block and took the run. You began to make suggestions. I know of this service over here, Your Honor, that DHS doesn't know about. Hey, let me tell you about it. Or, you know, that woman, I know, she's a member of the Mormon Church. Let's call the Relief Society. They will bring in their church members, and they will advocate and provide services for this church member. Or someone would say, you know, this boy loves playing soccer. Let's give visitation at the soccer game. Let's let him go to the soccer game. And I even had one CRB member say in the findings, is it possible, Your Honor, that we could have all the parents and all the children in all the day's reviews come and spend the day at the CRB office? And they can all play in the lobby and the other rooms while we conduct the hearings? I mean, it was like out-of-the-box thinking by CRB members who made all of these kinds of suggestions. I have a flute I'll give to this little boy who wants to learn how to play the flute. You know, my boy happens to be on the same soccer team. I'll pick him up and take him to the soccer game. Now, sometimes the suggestions were not appropriate and we couldn't do it because CRB has to remain professional, blah, 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 blah. But now, you might have a friend or CRB might know somebody who would step in for that particular service. So you began to make these suggestions, and you know what happened? CSD began to like you. DHS began to think, wow, these people could be my allies instead of my enemies. And we're not there yet. I know there are still DHS workers, there are still judges, there are still lawyers who treat you with contempt, who treat you with disdain, who treat you with indifference, and we don't care. Because we as CRBers are going to continue to interrupt anything that stands in the way of permanency for our children, because our children have done nothing wrong. It's not their fault that the workers are overwhelmed. It's not their fault that the budget has been cut. We are not going to let anything stand in the way of us exercising our role as interrupters. Now, that may not get us what we want, but indeed, it will get us somewhere. Now, many positive things have happened. I talked to every county I talked to celebrated its progress forward except one. And at the risk of being filmed, which I didn't realize I was going to be, and always makes me very nervous, I want to say, I think Multnomah County has made a huge mistake. Multnomah County's judges have done what I've always wanted them to do, which is take more interest in your cases. Take one case, one family, and see it through to the very end. Be active, do more reviews, and I'm thrilled that they are. But what did they do? They improved the lungs of the body and cut out the heart, because the number of review boards has been sliced, has been cut. And it's taking away this extremely valuable tool for judges, which is your eyes, your ears, your thoughts, your creativity, your imagination, and your view of your own children. And the court works for you, not the other way around. You pay for us. We are your tool. And to take you away from this process, I consider this a plague I hope does not spread. And you mustn't let it spread in your counties. Please don't quote me. I want to, before I touch on just a couple of the issues that remain, or it's just a couple of the issues of all of the issues that you have, I want to celebrate for a minute everything that I just think is so spectacular about you. First of all, the professionalism and the experience of the board members now. I tell you, we have, in calling around teachers, nurses, immigration lawyer, a real estate broker, a parks and recreation worker, education teachers, people in recovery, people who were foster children when they were young. We have mothers or grandmothers who are raising children. We have single fathers. We have a wealth of experience and professionalism on these boards. I couldn't have dreamed of anything quite so wonderful when I was a judge, of having all of you look at all of these children. And I want you to celebrate your dedication. I've never seen anything like it. It's the most important volunteer job in the United States of America. I truly believe that, because you are protecting and caring for our future as a nation when you care and protect our children. So I want to celebrate also that you have entered the electronic age. Now, I'm going to talk about the issues of entering the electronic age, because we're kind of in like embryonic stages of doing that. But it's so remarkable that you've done that. We now get the reports early enough that we can find out what's missing if we can read the reports. And we can ask for what's missing. Where are the educational assessments? We want to know from you how many foster placements this kid has been in and why this kid was removed from foster placement. We want to know where are your, where's your proof that you've been doing what you need to do to get this child adopted. You can ask for that in advance. And then the DHS can also give you up-to-date information, which we never had when the reports had to come in 2 weeks in advance. I also want to celebrate you on your community partners. CASA, God bless CASA. And so many, so many of the CRB members I talked to and the judges said, what would we do without the CASA reports? They're so informative, and so the CASA reports go into the CRB, and the CRB is able to read the CASA reports, and oh my gosh, it's just multiple information. And more information, the better. It leads us to better decision-making for the kids. I want to celebrate poor Leola McKenzie, who had to cut $1 million from the budget, Leola? $1 million from the budget. You guys, even if it meant consolidated boards, even if it meant increased caseloads, God forbid, even if it meant that, you are still here. In Utah, where I live now, they have eliminated the citizen review boards. They have returned to internal agency review. The wolf now watches the sheep, as we always saw it. And you are still here, and look at you. You are not only here, you're going strong. 67 boards throughout the state. You're reviewing 5,000 children. 5,000 children. Think of just one of those children who talked to us in the teen workshop, or one of those children on our movie. That's just one child's life being saved. And you review 5,000 of these children a year. I really can't tell you. I hope I don't break out in tears of gratitude for the work that you do. I'd like to celebrate the explosion in relative placements. We didn't have very many relative placements during the years that I was on the board, and now you really do explore these relative placements. And you really do abide by the Indian Child Welfare Act, which has been a difficult transition. But we now really do have you asking those questions. These tribal children belong to their tribes. They are foreign nations. They are like the United States with France, Italy, Austria inside of them. We would never keep a French child if France wanted the child back. And the tribes, the children belong to these tribes. The tribes are the parent. And so I see you looking at these and making these agonizing decisions about what to do when you have to return a child to a tribe, or return a child to a parent when you think the parent is only minimally adequate. That is a hard decision to make. They're so much happier, you think, in foster care. They're so much better cared for in foster care. I have to return this child to the minimally adequate parent. Yes, You do. And take it from me, who had not even minimally adequate parents. Sometimes that's not a bad decision. Sometimes that will be the right decision, because children always look for their real parents, almost always look for their real parents at some point. I would like to congratulate you, and I'd like us to celebrate the CRB's better relationship with DHS. I talk to workers who really like you. It's really true, who say they really look forward, not to the paperwork, that's a big problem, but look forward to appearing before you and hearing your questions and getting their minds solidified on what needs to be done next. And that relationship really, in most counties that I talk to, is very good between the field managers, who we must also celebrate, and the DHS workers. And I want to say these field managers are, for the most part, extraordinary. They arrange contact between the judges and the CRBs. They arrange meetings for the CRBs together so they can talk about issues and their problems. There are brown bags that are arranged. They talk to their workers and they tell them they appreciate them, which is so necessary for all of you to be appreciated. It's so rare. And when the field managers come up to you and say, you know, you did such a good job on that case, I mean, that's enough to carry us from case to case. So I want to celebrate the field managers as well. You have, over the years, gained the heightened respect of everyone who deals with you. You are now, your judges, some of them not only respect you, they revere you. This is pretty amazing. I don't know that they revere any of their lawyers, but they revere their CRB. And you know what? The lawyers even like you. It's something has happened over the last decade, or even maybe a little longer, where this relationship has turned into not buddy-buddy, not rubber stamp, not incestual. It's turned into a mutually respectful part of this large system that used to be viewed as monolithic and immovable, and still has some parts that need to be oiled and moved along. But the relationship is so extraordinary now, so much different than it was before. So what are the issues? Well, every county is quite different. And I suggest, my first suggestion, since I don't have 10 hours to talk, my first suggestion is, you know what? I sat at different tables, lunch and dinner, and I want to tell you, you have the answers. Some of you counties have solved problems that other counties were telling me about. Some of you worried about, what about recruitment? We haven't got ethnic and gender diversity. And somebody else said, well, how about we advertise on Facebook? Or what about Craigslist? Craigslist? You know, there are just these other ideas that you all have. So I suggest that your field managers not only get you together, but Darcy says she's working on a program where you can have groups on Facebook, and people from different counties can say, hey, what do you do? What should we do about this problem? What have you done about that problem? Because look at this room. It's full. Every mind here has an imaginative idea. Think about that. That's just this waterfall of fabulous ideas about how to solve the problems that are here. And some of the problems, visitation, don't get me started with the state audit. The policy is there, as Leola says, but the implementation is not. We need to work on visitation, and we need to work together to figure it out. It can't just be DHS. It's got to be all of us figuring it out. There are too many reviews for some of you. Us old folk, we can't work from 8 to 6. You know, we get like brain dead by 4. So somebody else suggested, well, why not overlap the reviews? One board sits for 3/4 of a day, one board sits for 3/4 of a day. Is that even possible? Maybe not. But these kinds of imaginative ideas are out there to think about how to solve that problem. What do we do about uninvolved and recalcitrant lawyers? They drive me crazy. We make friends. Very terrible to think about, but we do. We make friends with lawyers. And it can be done. What do we do when the continuity of services change and the providers quit or change and the service doesn't continue? What do we do about not getting enough information in the forms? What do we do about our personal feelings versus what we have to do legally on a case? And can we talk about our biases, our biased language, the way our speaker, our wonderful speaker today, told us to do? Can't we sit down together and say, you know what I think? We live in a neighborhood of Hispanic people and they all park their cars on the lawn. And somebody says to me, well, does that mean all Hispanic people park their cars on the lawn? No, Catherine, let's look at your racism. Not because I'm a bad person, but because every one of us was born in this society, raised in this society that these children who picked black dolls and white dolls are raised in, and we have to unlearn this racism. But it's easier if I'm talking to you who I like, and you like me, and we can talk about it in our groups. So these are some of the issues, but I want to talk about 3 issues that I just thought were amazing that are in every county. One is the electronic reports, the e-packets. 60% of you are doing e-packets. Where are the other 40%? Okay, I would have been one of those. I'm the girl who told my dentist boss, nobody's ever going to pay for their dental work with a plastic card. I'm the one who, when I bought my first computer, the guy came in with this box and he said, this is a modem you can get on the internet all over the world. And I said, oh, who will ever want to do that? So I'm with you, 40%, but let me tell you, my stepdaughter, who is a young child of my husband who had a hormonal rush late in life, she gave me a smartphone for Christmas. And I said, oh, honey, I'm 68 years old. And I said, which I knew she would understand, hello? A smartphone? And she said, Mom, do you really want to be grandfathered in? You know what? No, we don't want to be grandfathered in. I don't know about the 40% of you, but I still feel young. I want to paint my toenails blue. Someday I'd like to skydive. I want to know when my kids ask, do you like the Bare Naked Ladies? I want to know they're a band. You know? So I bit the bullet, and I sneaked out at night because it made me feel like a teenager and went to the Verizon LG smartphone classes. And I Googled, how do you use a smartphone? And up it came, and I learned it, and now I'll bet I know what ROTFL means. Do you? Who knows it? What does it know? Oh, look at you! I just learned it. It means rolling on the floor laughing. So now I can text my children, which is the only way they'll communicate with me. And now Bill Wagner is talking me into getting an iPod. An iPod. You must do this, you 40%. Come on. You are not old. You are not dying. You are not morbid. You are getting there. Find someone on your board. Find someone on your board who will teach you, or call Christina, or call Darcy. They will teach you how to use these e-packets. Start by taking the paper packets and then the e-packets. Compare them. See how you like one or not the other. Make sure that you know how to wind your way through them. And start using those e-packets. Doggone it. Because you know what? Everything's on the web now. Everything's on the web now. And if you don't want to learn the web, I don't blame you. I don't want to learn the web. But we have to learn the web. I am very angry. I'm very sad that my old way of life is passing me by. I really wanted to just sit with my feet up, you know, eat bonbons and watch TV and read real books. But I got to learn how to use a Kindle or a Nook. I got to learn how to operate an HD TV. I got to know what Blu-ray is. Come on. The fact that you're on this board tells me you ain't ancient. So that would be my advice to you. And next year, you know, Bill Richardson said, "Oh, I'm long in the tooth." Bill, you're younger than me, I think. You're not long in the tooth, but I say next year at this conference, we should recognize all the people who've gone over successfully to the right side, which is the e-packets, and we will call it the "I may be long in the tooth, but I still have that bite" award. Okay? Now, I want to talk to you about something else that came up in, how am I doing on time? I forgot to start my stopwatch. I know how to use my stopwatch, but I forgot to use it. Typical. I want to talk to you about something else that came up in every county. I'll show you. Where did I put it? Okay. We're coming into the review. Here, I'm gonna get down to my real height. Hi, you're the mother? Hi, you're the mother? Oh. Okay. And how are you doing? And you have something to say? Who are you? Oh, the child. You guys, we got to do something about these computers in the CRB reviews. Okay? Now, I'm not saying don't use your computers in the CRB review. Don't use your iPods. I'm not saying that because, you know, here I am. I just learned a smartphone. It's probably the wave of the future. What I'm saying is we need to do something to make the appearance of these computers less alienating to the parties. I was very interested in that article in your newsletter about trauma, about the victims of trauma. Many of us here are the victims of trauma. We know our parents and our children are the victims of trauma. The DHS workers, probably the victims of trauma, if not as children, certainly in their work. So we need to make the environment in which they come anxiety-free. And this article in your newsletter suggested that we make the rooms in which these parents hear their cases a little more friendly. Now, in my courtroom in Multnomah County, I took all the books out. You know how judges love it, you know, books we've never read. Books behind us so we look so professional and judicial, you know, black robes and, you know, all of this alienating stuff. And I took all the books out and put stuffed animals. And every time anyone came in the court, I would say, would you like, especially a child, would you like a stuffed animal? Oh, yeah. Well, these are used animals, and they need adoptive homes. They need someone to take care of them. Would you do that for me? And do you know who ended up asking for the stuffed animals a lot of the time? The lawyers. Your Honor, I have this a client who really would like that bunny. Okay, tough guy, you come on up here and get this bunny. And in the tribal court, it was so interesting. We always had food in the library, in the lobby. People could eat food. How do you fight when you're eating what somebody else made for you? You know, and we had posters on the wall, and it was a much more friendly environment. And I'm suggesting, I know this sounds very unprofessional, but look, get some pillows on your chairs. Get some stuffed animals. Bring some flowers. Have coffee and cookies. I'll tell you what, paste pictures on your computer here. A big smiley face. A picture of little babies playing. I mean, it sounds outrageous and it sounds unprofessional, but it does not change how you behave. It changes how the people feel about how you behave. So that's an issue that you all had. And here's a very serious issue that all of you had. You want more feedback from your judges. You want more feedback from your judges. So let me tell you how to do it, okay? There's a little itty-bitty part of judges that is human. A part of us wants to be loved. We really do. We want to be admired. We want to be acknowledged. And so give that cat a little catnip. You know, I used to love it when CRBers would come into the courtroom and I'd finish a case and I'd be sitting up there and they'd come up and say, "Hi, I'm Edith. I'm on the CRB that heard this case." I'd say, "Oh, hi. It's really nice to meet you." And she'd say, "Yeah, we're so appreciative of you taking our findings and putting them into the order." I'd say, "Well, you know, you CRBers, you are great people." You know, because it made me feel good that you cared enough to come into the courtroom and introduce yourselves. It wasn't your coordinator or anything, it was just you, a real person. And you accidentally happened to come in on a case that you had sat on as a board. And so I was able to say to you, "You know, I really appreciate the work you do." And suddenly, there's that connection. So the next thing you do is you go into the judge and you say, "Hey, Judge, we're having an honoring luncheon and we'd like to honor you." Well, so you invite me to come and you say, "We'd like to get to know you." And I say, "Oh, okay, we'd like to know something about you, your judicial philosophy, what you think of the CRB. And believe me, your judges, if you come to them as person to person and ask them to come to a place where they're going to be recognized for their hard work, honored for their commitment to children, they will likely come and it will start to create this wonderful energy between you." And I have enlisted one of your CRB members, Bill Distad from Marion County, and he's going to help you because he will come around to any board who invites him and who has invited a judge, and we're going to teach you a way to welcome your judge. Getting to know you, getting to know all about you. Getting to like you, getting to hope you like me. You ready? Sing. Haven't you noticed? Suddenly I'm bright and breezy because of all the beautiful and new things I'm learning about you day by day. Thank you, Bill. Wouldn't your judges be so pleased? You could even do a little dance. I saw you dancing today. One thing the judges told me they want from you, and I got this from a fair number of them, they want more detailed findings. Okay? They want to know more. And if you can't put it in the findings, the review is findings driven, if you can't put them in those findings, put them in the additional findings. Tell them what the hearing was like. How did it go? Who was really participating? Who really paid attention? What did it really seem like to you? And of course, you have to phrase this in professional ways, but we felt the commitment of the parent was very genuine. You know, as judges, we often put this kind of stuff in our trial transcripts to preserve it for appeal, so that the appellate court can read what was going on in the court. And so the judges said to me, we really pay attention to these findings, and we'd like them to be more detailed. So very interestingly, I don't know how you can do it or if you're allowed to do it, but that's what the judges were asking for. Even the judges who love you said, you know, we'd love to have more detailed findings. So that gives you a real opportunity to insert more into your report than you thought you could or that you have done. Finally, I would like to say again, who is CRB? Who are you really? And I was going to read a little bit from my memoir, but we've run out of time. You gave me so much rich material. But what I was going to read to you is a little story about how I think I was 3 when I remember my mother shaking me in a grocery store. I don't know why, shaking me. And I remember my head going back and forth and thinking I was an airplane or something. And suddenly, 2 they must have been grocery clerks, grabbed me and grabbed her and pinned her up against the cans. And someone took me away and sat me down and gave me a juice and said, "No hit. Mama, no hit. No shake." I was 3. If you don't think you make a difference, I'm sure these grocery clerks don't remember making a difference. But that made a huge difference for me because I remembered it. And one day I went grocery shopping, which always gives me pleasure, and I saw a mother about to shake her child. And I went up to her and I said, "Can I help you? Don't shake your child." And she said, "These little twits. I got 4 of them. They're all brats." I said, "Well, here, let me take this little boy, and I'll take care of him while you shop." And she said, "How do I know you're not a pervert?" And I said, "I'm glad you care." So I gave her my fanny pack, and I said, "Well, I'll meet you back in 20 minutes. And I took him and I got him a juice. And I said, "No hit. Mama, no hit or shake you, okay?" Just, sipped his juice. I don't know if he really understood me, but I felt better about it. And I took him back to his mother, who grabbed him by the arm and said, "Let's get out of here." And I went to pay for my juice, and she'd stolen my wallet. So, did I make a difference? I think I made a difference. It may not have seemed so, and it may not seem to you that you make a difference. But let me tell you, at the end of the day, when you feel strained and you feel exhausted and you feel like you can't do this anymore, you have made a difference. It may have been pivotal, and you may actually hear about it, which will be a miracle. But it may have not been pivotal, but it will have been important. A huge difference. You do this. Why do you do this? You do this with your heart. You do it with your heart. You do it because you love children and you love families, and because you really can feel that inside of you when you finish. You, because of your respect and because of the reverence paid to you, you really have got a powerful, powerful position. And you have increased DHS's and the court's credibility, because we can all say, "Hey, you know what? A group of your own citizens has looked at this case, and they agree with me." So you make a difference in people's perceptions of DHS and of the court. Not everyone can do this. It takes a very unique person to do it. It is sad, troubling, frustrating, sometimes unrewarding work. And it rarely gives you back the recognition and praise that you deserve. You do it for love, for interest, for concern. And as Sue Bianco said from Marion County, she says, I am here because I have a passion for it. So I'm telling you, I want you to examine biases and misperceptions. I want you to meet often and discuss issues and resolutions to issues, share ideas. I want you to practice assertiveness, because you can't be an interrupter unless you interrupt, which means speaking up, asking questions. And I want you to make those difficult findings, make them with truth and firmness without reducing the dignity of the parties. And I want you to go on with this with your priceless contribution to the safety and the permanent planning for children. And I don't want you to let anything or anyone interrupt you. Thank you.